So, what's the most unique power system you've seen? Is it alchemy from Full Metal Alchemist? Or maybe it's the branches of sin from Dead Man Wonderland? Hell, it could even be innocence from D. Gray Man. Regardless of what your answer is, I think we all can agree that when it comes to unique power systems, the more unique it is, the more interesting it is in its entirety. And that's because when you have something that's new, it's very shiny and it captivates the reader or the watcher. Well, as the title explains, today we're going to be talking about the power system of Soul Eater. And Soul Eater's power system can basically be divided into two separate categories: Weapon Meister teams and Soul/Soul Wavelengths. But before we get into that, if you want more anime content like this, leave a like and subscribe, and make sure you hit that notification bell so you can be notified anytime I post a new video. Now, let's get back to Soul Eater. So first step, let's talk about demon weapons. And demon weapons are humans that have the ability to transform into a specific weapon. And this ability is hereditary and can be passed on from parent to child. But although this is a hereditary ability, it is not a naturally occurring ability. So you see, the first demon weapons first started to appear 800 years ago when a heretic witch took inanimate objects and fused it with the souls of humans and other witches. And these human experiments is what led to the creation of what's known as weapon DNA. And this is the hereditary piece of DNA that allows people to transform. And this new subclass of humans would become ostracized from society due to their abilities and just like fear of what they could do to normal people. And this would eventually lead to the development of the Demon Weapon Meister Academy, or the DWMA for short, by Lord Death. And Lord Death is a god or Shinigami that reigns over the world and maintains peace and order across it. And while weapons are at the DWMA, they basically learn to control their abilities and are paired with a Meister, which I will get into later, to go on missions to basically serve as police against supernatural threats and things like that. And while most demon weapons can only take one form, there is a special clan that has the ability to have multiple weapon forms, and they are known as the Naka Tsukasa clan. And in addition to their ability to transform into weapons, demon weapons also have the ability to consume souls. And this stems from that natural born demon weapons are incomplete. As I said before, demon weapons are made when inanimate objects are fused with human souls and a witch's soul. So natural born demon weapons lacks a witch's soul, and in order to become a true demon weapon, they must consume 99 Kishin eggs, which is a specific type of soul that I will get into later in the video, and a witch's soul, and in that specific order. And after a demon weapon becomes a true demon weapon, they gain the title of Death Sight, which is basically a title given to people who have completed the whole process of becoming a true demon weapon and have gained tremendous power and are now able to be wielded by Lord Death himself. And after gaining the title, they do not become exclusive weapons of Lord Death. They still have a regular Meister, but can be called upon by Lord Death to be used at any time. There's also a significant power boost that comes with becoming a true demon weapon, as well as the ability to develop new powers based around the soul or magic of the witches that were consumed to make you a true demon weapon. Now let's talk about the other half of the team between weapon and Meisters. So Meisters are regular humans that are able to wield demon weapons. And typically this is one at a time, but there are certain Meisters who are skilled enough to maintain a connection between two weapons at the same time. And the reason most Meisters are only able to wield one demon weapon at a time is because in order for them to wield them, they must be able to synchronize their soul wavelengths. In the case where they are able to dual wield demon weapons, most of the cases the demon weapons that are being wielded are blood related and take similar forms but may not have the same power. An example of this would be Death the Kid's team and his partners Liz and Patty's, who take the form of two pistols that are able to compress soul wavelengths and shoot it as ammo. Another example will be Killick and his partners Fire and Thunder, who are demon pot weapons who have same shape but different abilities. Fire is able to create and manipulate flames, and thunder is able to create and manipulate lightning. So what set Meisters apart from the normal population is their soul perception ability. And while this ability varies from person to person, it essentially allows them to see or sense the souls or soul wavelengths of others around them. Meisters are also typically good at manipulating their own soul wavelength. And even more skilled Meisters who are good at this can even attack others with their soul wavelength. And this is a technique known as soul force or soul menace, depending on if you're reading the manga or watching the anime. I personally prefer Soul Force. And so earlier I talked about that there is a compatibility factor when it comes to weapon Meister teams. So what happens when a Meister tries to wield a weapon that they are not compatible with? Well, they go through something called rejection. So rejection is basically the dissonance between a Meister and a weapon. So when a Meister is trying to wield a weapon while experiencing rejection, they will experience severe physical strain and can even be burned by the weapon depending on how bad the rejection is. And not only does the Meister have backlash from it, but the weapon can also be hurt from it because the Meister is basically sending their soul wavelength into them when it's not in sync with the weapon's soul. And this is basically akin to being attacked by the Meister soul wavelength. So it's basically like the Meister is attacking them with the soul force technique. But that's really everything you really need to know about the weapon Meister teams. And I've been saying soul wavelength a lot, but what is that? So soul wavelengths are basically a type of energy given off by a soul, and is often described as the rhythm or sound that is produced by an individual. And while everyone's soul wavelength is unique, and within an individual soul wavelength, there will be different sounds or rhythms that convey the personality of the person. And for individuals like Meisters who have the ability to perceive the soul, this basically gives them a kind of surface level interpretation of what this person will be like. So somebody who is more rambunctious and very like chaotic will have a more energetic soul wavelength. So the true power of a soul wavelength lies in its ability to synchronize with other people around it, and this is known as soul resonance. And this is the basis for weapon Meister teams. And I was talking about this earlier, but yeah, soul resonance is what allows the teams to work coherently and function properly. And so the technique of soul resonance is actually a process of the Meister sending their soul wavelength into the weapon amplifying it and sending it back and repeating this resonance cycle. And this basically is what allows to maintain a stable connection between the two. And if they were able to increase their rate of resonance, so increase the rate at which they're able to send, amplify, send it back, it can lead to the development of strong techniques. And there are also more advanced forms of soul resonance that allow multiple weapon Meister teams to resonate their souls, and this is known as a resonance link. But let's talk about some of the beneficial abilities that are gained through the ability to resonate your souls with others, whether it's just between a demon weapon and a Meister or multiple weapon Meister teams. These are the base things that are provided through a soul resonance. So 1, there is a telepathic link between you and the people that you are resonating your soul with, and this allows for quick communication and covert communication. And in terms for a resonance link, this basically allows multiple teams to communicate effectively and plan out strategies and execute them without having to verbally say anything. And this is especially good in battle because it allows the element of surprise to stay there. And in addition to this ability, some individuals have unique traits to their soul wavelength that allow them to affect others around them. And some of these unique wavelengths are actually linked to certain races within the story of Soul Eater. Like earlier, I was talking about witches. So witches are actually predisposed to having a madness wavelength. And so a madness wavelength is a very powerful type of wavelength that a person can have, as it can cause other people around them to fall into madness or a specific type of madness, because every individual will not have the same type of madness. It is a personalized type that is determined by your personality. But what this usually leads to are people losing their morality, so they don't really care about the other people around them. They become more violent, they become more like aggressive and power hungry. But madness is not the only unique type of wavelength, but it is the main like force that drives people to commit horrible acts within the story. But there are others that have more positive effects, and one of those is the anti-demon wavelength. So the anti-demon wavelength is essentially the polar opposite of the madness wavelength and is able to purify the evil that is caused by a madness wavelength, as well as the evil that can arise within a person's soul. And while both of these wavelengths are extremely strong in their own right, if somebody comes up against somebody that has a weaker soul but has one of these unique traits, the stronger soul is still able to resist the pull of these certain types of wavelengths, such as madness or anti-demon. And like I said earlier, these unique traits can actually be linked to different races or types of souls that people can have. So now let's talk about these different types of souls. So when it comes to soul types, they're typically separated by races. And within these races, there are certain characteristics that are common across all of them. But first, let's start with human souls, which typically have 3 forms that it can take. So the first type of soul is just a standard soul, and they can have a variety of unique different traits within their soul wavelength, and it is greatly dependent on the personality of that person. And the second form is a weapon soul, and this is very similar to a normal standard human soul, but there's also some type of incorporation of their weapon form within the shape of their soul. A great example of this is the Death Scythe Justin Law, who is a guillotine death weapon, and when you look at his soul, it has the base soul of a human with it, but on top of the soul there is a spiritual form of a guillotine that is attached to it. The third most common soul type is that of the Quiche egg. And a quiche egg is what happens when a human soul is corrupted through the use of violence. Any act that can be seen as a sin is something that can lead to the development of a quiche egg and the corruption of a human soul. And this is the type of soul that weapons must consume in order to become a true demon weapon, along with the soul of a witch. And while I said that humans can have one of these 3 types, there's also a 4th type of soul that humans can have that is extremely rare, and it is known as a Grigori soul. And a Grigori soul basically looks like a standard soul, but it has wings. And it is said that only 1 in every 50 million people will ever have a Grigori soul. But does this provide any different abilities? Well, one of the abilities a Grigori soul provides is the ability to fly. And Meisters who are skilled at manipulating their own soul wavelength can develop this ability on their own, but it is much easier to develop this ability through soul resonance with a demon weapon. But now let's talk about the souls of witches. So all witches are predisposed to having a madness wavelength. And the type of madness will depend upon the witch and will have varying effects on how they affect others. While some madness wavelengths may cause people to hallucinate, others may cause them to actually act out and perform harmful behavior or violent acts. And witches' soul usually have a darker aura around them, and this is because when people have the ability to use magic, that magic makes them crave destruction. And finally, the last type of soul that we're going to talk about is the souls of the great old ones. So the great old ones are godlike beings similar to Lord Death that have madness wavelengths that are able to affect the entire world. And to avoid spoilers, I'm not going to go any deeper than that because that kind of spoils a lot of the late end game of the story. But that wraps up everything you need to know about Soul Eater's power system. And if you have any other anime topics that you want me to cover, leave it down in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next video.